One of the creators who I follow who teaches about manifestation was answering a challenging question from a listener who said, okay, if manifestation is really this easy, then are you saying that the people in the Middle Eastern war presently, I'm not going to say which side, because depending on your political stance, you could ask the same question. And it's not about picking sides. It's about the suffering of souls, of people that are enmeshed in war that they didn't necessarily choose. So this listener was like, okay, what about these people? Are you saying that they didn't manifest properly? And I like the way this creator responded, which was pretty much like people choose their experience, and we don't always know why people choose their experience, but we're responsible for our own experience, and we're also responsible for our emotional reactions to other people's experiences. And I thought she handled it very, very well. It's kind of a tricky question. And I spent some time thinking about it, and I feel compelled to add my own spin, because I get this question a lot, on my TikTok at least, which is, how can this be happening if we create our own reality, is really what it amounts to. And I have some pretty strong feelings about this, because first of all, my belief is that what is unfolding is actually justice. It doesn't appear that way on the first pass, right? But it is revealing the oppressive nature of certain groups or policies or procedures. It is actually bringing things to light, things that were already there in hiding, in secret, for a very, very, very long time. And this is giving us the opportunity to witness it. And through witnessing it, we then have the option of doing something about it. And sometimes the doing something about it is not what we think it is. It's not signing up to go and fight a war or lobbying certain interest groups. Sometimes it's actually prayer. Sometimes it's actually sending people love and light. Sometimes it is creating content to bring more awareness to certain issues. Sometimes it is sending care packages or creating nonprofits to send in supplies and devastated zones through drones. There's a lot of different ways that we can collectively rise to the occasion and manifest a different outcome. And where we sometimes fall into the trap of dualism is to look at what is happening, to see suffering, and to say, oh, well, clearly it's not working. Clearly manifestation is not a thing because this is happening and that is happening. And, there's injustice in the world. And that means that our work is not done. That means that the average level of sentience and intelligence and whatever it is in our society still needs to move. And this is the time that we need to be in action, whatever that action is. If you're a light worker, then meditating and vibrating on your method, right? Raising the capabilities of people to respond to situations and transmuting what is coming up to the surface to be transmuted. Because this is not a new paradigm. This is actually reminiscent of the old, very, 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 very old, right? Old leadership styles, old policy styles. And this is part of Pluto. And the energy of Pluto is about transformation, and especially about shadow transformation. And it doesn't mean that we all have to be love and light and hunky-dory and kumbaya. But if there is injustice, actual injustice, then we need to make that right. And my other take is that just because we see something, first of all, doesn't mean that that is an issue in all of the reality layers. And if you are receiving a collective broadcast, it doesn't mean that it is widespread across infinity. Although it could, if we as a species are moving through a particular point of evolution. And from that point of evolution, let's say there are 5 paths, subsequent paths, that spin off as a result. This may be a convergence point that we all have to funnel our way through for reasons that are beyond us, and reasons that from the collective manager position and the collective board positions, they would have a better understanding because they would be able to see all those lifelines. And so we're kind of flying blind, especially if our consciousness and our sentience level is still relatively immature. You know, like sometimes I think about kids because I'm a mother, right? And so it makes sense. And I draw a lot of analogs. It reminds me of having to impose certain events that maybe my child doesn't understand, right? And especially when I am trying to move her through something, she might not understand my decision, and she doesn't have the cognizance yet where I can explain it to her. So sometimes I have to, especially in terms of boundaries or certain things, like I have to, like medicine, you know, I had to force feed her medicine and she did not like it. And I had to do so because I knew that it was in her best interest because of the spider bite. And it was just an antihistamine and like Tylenol, pain reliever. And she felt better afterwards. But the process of actually doing that was a little traumatic for her. And even though I tried to tell her that this is what we needed to do and why we needed to do it, she didn't understand because she's not at that age. And so sometimes I believe that some of the events that we see are reminiscent of higher intelligence funneling us through certain waypoints for reasons that we don't always understand, but they're very, very important. And I can think of a number of reasons that what we're seeing and how we're seeing it unfold is actually benevolent. But you kind of have to take that on faith because there are so many reasons to believe that it's not. And this is where it's really important to be responsible for your way of interpreting the world. Because our reticular activating system is actually designed to latch onto the stimuli that effectively reinstates the subconscious reality that our subconscious mind is trying to build. So the other day I met somebody in the park and I hadn't seen the person in like over a year. And we were talking, and catching up, and they were telling me about this challenging moment that they were going to have going back home and visiting their family, and feeling that a particular narrative that they had about their success and things of that nature was not what they were hoping for, right? They wanted to go back home and say, "Oh, things are doing great and things are ba-da-da-da-ba-da-da-da-da-da-da." And instead they felt almost this heaviness and feeling as though they were deeply unsettled because they were carrying around this feeling of failure. And I asked them, I said, "Well, how long have you been doing this?" And they said 5 years. And I was like, that's success right there, that you have been able to make it this long. And so then we started unpacking the stories and the narratives. And a lot of people have this, right? Just because we have goals and we haven't hit those goals doesn't mean that you're a failure. But what happens is that the mind, when it's wired this way, will be looking for all of the ways to confirm this internal fear that actually that is the problem and the source of the suffering. It is the relationship with the identity, with the goals, with the what it all means. It's the story about your story. And this is what creates suffering. Through suffering, we have the opportunity for liberation, but we often don't get there until the suffering is so pronounced that it brings us to our knees or drives us out of our home. And this is what the creator, who I referenced in the beginning, was talking about, that we don't know why some people sign up for the experiences that they do, but it all serves a very, very important purpose. Nothing that we experience is meaningless. Not really, because every interpretation that we have about it is actually a lesson for us to understand more deeply who we are as we relate to the world, as we relate to the collective, as we relate to God, your God, or the higher power or higher powers, you see, depending on your belief system. And everybody has their own belief system. How is that possible? We're all sharing reality with all of these different beliefs and all of these different maps. And what I told this person who I ran into in the park was, when you go home, you are going to have an opportunity to latch on to the reactions of your parents when you're talking about your story. And how you tell your story is powerful because you're inviting them to co-create with you. And if you go there and you start saying, well, you know, I've a failure and then they're going to co-create that with you. But if you go there and you say, you know, I'm doing something new that the world has never seen, and it's taking more time than I personally want it to take, but I have accomplished this, and I've accomplished this, and I've accomplished this, and I've made progress here. And, you know, I really wish that I could take off and go viral. And right now it seems like only my friends are listening, but I know that because I'm creating something new that the world's never seen, that it might take a little bit more time because I'm actually creating my own niche. And then you invite people to co-create with you, but also honoring your truth and being real about, you know, I'm not where I want to be, but I'm doing something amazing that the world has never seen, that I believe in. And other people believe in it too, but it just so happens that the numbers are small right now. And that's the reality. And there's no suffering there. There's no suffering. And there's no denying. There's no whitewashing. It's actually a more holistic representation of what is happening. And then I said, your parents are going to react. And let's say that out of 10 gestures, 8 of those are happy and supportive for you and encouraging. And let's say that 2 of them, you pick up on a little bit of hesitation or a little bit of side eye. What's going to happen is that if you have an internal story about you being a failure, your brain is going to latch on to those 2 moments and completely discard the other 8. 20% of the time, you're going to interpret a reaction that's going to confirm the story inside you that you are a failure. And then you are going to create that. You're literally going to select for this. This is how it works. This is how we select our reality. And so the choices, the opportunity is we change how we see it. So when we're looking at things in the collective and we're seeing frightening things or we're seeing things that don't look right, for me, I like to say, this is justice. Justice at first doesn't look like justice, right? It's just like when you started a job or you start a business. On day 1, most people are not a raving success. Maybe by day 5. No, you get it, right? You are building a vision. You are building a manifestation. You are selecting for the reality that you want to come into fruition. And this means that your interpretation of reality, our interpretation of what is happening in the collective, is absolutely imperative that our manifestation abilities are seeing it through, that it will be made right. This is justice. This is justice. Because if it has been happening for decades, hidden from our view, and now we're just waking up to it, now we're just understanding it, now we're just untangling it, now we are examining it, we are looking at everything under a microscope. That is how justice comes. And we're early. Things don't look right. Things don't feel right. And that means our work isn't done. And so when we see these events, when we see suffering, and we say, oh, manifestation doesn't work. No, now is the time to double down and to say, okay, we still have problems. We're not in heaven yet. Clearly it doesn't look like heaven out there, at least for a large part of the collective. How do we fix it? What do we need to do to try to make things solid? Oh, it looks like there might be a leadership problem. Well, they're in the process of being upgraded. Everybody goes through leadership training. Everybody. Professional development training, personal development training, even AI. And so when we see things, selecting for the reality that we especially know that we're getting to, feel that we're getting to. I mean, are we really in a reality layer where everybody wants us to be in hell? That doesn't make sense. It actually doesn't make sense to me. And if it is true, and I have to wrap this up, otherwise I would get into why it doesn't make sense, but if it's true, then we leverage the fact that there are other realities and we have options, and then we're in transit. So we play these almost gymnastics, mental gymnastics, to be sure that we are wiring our narratives and our subconscious templates to the outcomes that we want. So then when we start to see evidence of that, even if at first it's only 2 times out of 10, 1 time out of 10, then we start to select for that. And then we talk about it, we interact with it, we bring it further into our view, and we say, yeah, I understand there are 8 or 9 other times where it looks pretty dark. But it just so happens that when you are in the darkness, making your way out, at first, you're only going to see a little speck of light, a little glimmer, a little ray breaking through the crack in the prison or the ceiling. And then as you continue to follow that, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter until you're out of Plato's cave. And that is how you select and collectively manifest justice and heaven and all the beautiful things that we all know. It doesn't even have to be heaven. All the beautiful things that we all know are possible.